Welcome, and thanks for joining us for this live question and answer session about grant funds for non-infrastructure projects using American Rescue Plan Act, otherwise known as ARPA funds. I'm Andy Radig, and in a moment we'll be joined by City Manager Mark Roloff. In this session, we'll be explaining how these grant funds can be used, how to apply for them, and how applicants will be evaluated. We'll also answer questions submitted through Facebook Live or by email. If you'd like to submit a question, please submit it to ARPA comments at oshkoshwi.gov, and we'll answer as many as our time allows today. We'll also encourage you to watch our recent public information meetings that were held at City Hall that were recorded and are available on the Oshkosh Media YouTube page, as well as on the Oshkosh Media Gov TV channel. With that, we bring in our City Manager, Mark Roloff. And, Mark, thanks for joining us today. And I guess if you could start off by giving us a little bit of background about these ARPA funds.
Well, thank you, Andy. Yeah, the City Council has made available about a quarter of the city's allocation of $20.5 million in ARPA funds, as you said, American Rescue Plan Act. So if you guys can toss up slide 3, just kind of gives a good summary of where we're at. So the city was allocated $20.5 million from the federal government. And after a great deal of discussion, the council decided to allocate 25% of that, or $5.1 million, for local entities for non-infrastructure purposes. The remaining 3/4 is for infrastructure purposes. The council's already allocated not quite $2.8 million, which means we have about $2,350,000 that remains to be allocated. So that's really what we're talking about. And there's a lot of different requirements and things like that, but we're here to answer a lot of questions, and I would encourage you to take a look at those sessions that we've held that are on YouTube and Oshkosh Media website, where you can access those. But part of this was to make sure that we had funds available for the impact that maybe our nonprofit entities or other entities in town that were impacted by COVID that may have had a delayed reaction to this. So if you could put up slide 6 there, I want to talk about this a little bit before we get to our questions and answers. We are under a requirement to have these funds spent by the end of 2026. But more importantly, in the short term, is that we need to have these funds allocated no later than December 31, 2024. And what allocated means is we've identified a recipient and the purpose of those funds. So what we're doing now is soliciting those funds so we can get, we can identify who these funds can be allocated to. And we will have all these funds allocated by the end of 2024. We do have a preference that can have the funds expended by December 31, 2024, because we want to make sure that the funds do get spent. And if we have to reallocate it after December 31st, 2024, we won't be able to, and we will have to surrender that money back to the federal government. So we want to keep working with people to make sure that they can get it spent as soon as possible. But we will work with people if they haven't spent their funds by the end of 2024. It's just preferential for funds that can do it. And while we do accept applications for operating funds, we're also going to give priority to requests that are focused on capital or non-operating needs. And really, non-operating is also about making sure that it's not an ongoing expense that you're going to continue to need money for, that we will be unable to help support after the ARPA funds are taken away. And of course, we will accept applications even from folks who may have previously applied and weren't allocated funds when we did the previous one. But the most important thing here, obviously, is applications are due to the city manager's office no later than 4:30 p.m. on Friday, March 1st, 2024. So those are kind of the key issues that we want people to be aware of. And we're going to get into some questions that we've received over the course of time, but if you want to toss up slide 7 so that everybody knows where you can submit your applications to. There's 3 ways. You can either do it electronically at the email address shown there, citymgr@oshkoshwi.gov, or of course mail it to the city manager's office at the address shown there, or place in the City Hall drop box, which is very easy, right in front of City Hall. You can just do that. And then slide 8 just gives you where more information can be found. And it's on our Hot Topics site, and if you click on that, you're going to get access to the application and some of the links that are relevant to this. So you'll get the criteria that we're using, so you get an idea of what types of things we're looking for. But we're going to answer questions that we received today as well. So there's our Hot Topics. You can, the frequently asked questions, the application itself, or the review criteria. So all those things are right there on the website, and other links are embedded inside some of those items as well. So with that, Andy, I know you had some sort of introductory questions to kind of get things stirred, and hopefully that'll inspire other people to ask more questions. We've gotten some great questions that were asked of us during our informational sessions, so I would encourage you to look at those as well if you're listening now, and we don't get to every single question, but the people that showed up, and we had a great turnout, probably 20 people at each of our events, so we had about 40 people in our combined audiences, and good number of questions, and they were great quality, and we've incorporated some of them into our frequently asked questions. So feel free to ask questions. We are happy to add them, put them back on the website so you can see that stuff. So Andy, I know based on the questions you've been fielding, we've gotten some that have been truly more frequently asked than others.
That's right. And I think the first one is maybe just a point of clarification, a little bit of background. So a lot of our materials say that these funds that are available are grant funds for non-infrastructure projects. Now, as a point of clarification, that goes back to that comment that you made that the council approved 75% of the ARPA funds for infrastructure projects and 25% for non-infrastructure projects. But that does not preclude somebody for requesting funding for, like, let's say, a capital project.
That's correct, because when we talked about the 75% for infrastructure, that's city infrastructure, street projects, capital equipment for the city. So that's the city's operations. That doesn't preclude anybody from requesting funds for capital items for their nonprofit entity or something like that. And quite honestly, the first round of allocations that we did, that's almost $2.8 million. Probably about 2.6 of it was all capital related. So we absolutely recognize that there may be some nonprofits out there that have some capital campaigns that they might be working on. We don't have a set number of percent of how much we're going to support, but generally, any of the support has been a relatively small amount. 10% has probably been about the norm for some of our capital. So recognize that we wouldn't necessarily fund an entire thing. You've got to demonstrate that you have matching funds, that you've done fundraising on your own, and been creative. So part of the application process is telling the story about why you have this need, and sometimes it's important for us as a governmental entity, when you have funds like this available, to step up, because it also sends a very strong message to the people that the nonprofits might be targeting for other fundraising, that, well, the city feels strongly enough about this project too, so we'd encourage your participation. And we love to be used as an example to help do fundraising. And I think with some of the other efforts that, some of the other initiatives we funded, it was because we could lend our name and our support for these groups to leverage our funds to get more private philanthropic type funds as well.
Sure. Another question that has come up a lot recently at some of our sessions has been regarding funding operational expenses. We talked about the infrastructure, well, not infrastructure, but like capital projects are encouraged, but to what extent might we be able to fund some sort of an operating expense?
Well, and that question has come up a lot because we did not fund a lot of operating costs with the first round. But there's no prohibition against using it for operating funds. But the intent of the grant funds is to assist agencies in overcoming challenges brought upon by the COVID pandemic, particularly as it relates to addressing long-term needs of a particular agency, but also to address issues that are of immediate nature. And those immediate nature could be a very short-term gap filling to help an organization get through a backlog or a surge in demand for their services. And Andy, I mean, I know you know this, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers know this, but our nonprofit entities fill roles that frankly government can't provide, and they're much more nimble, less bureaucratic. So giving them a little bit of operating money to assist them is not necessarily a bad thing. I do want to discourage people from asking for funds that, if they don't have a way to continue to fund that after the ARPA funds are gone, because once the ARPA funds are gone, the city will be unable to fund these ongoing operations. So that's where we're hesitant about the operating, because we don't want you to become dependent on our funds, and then you're left, empty-handed. What are we going to do in the future? So if you are asking for operating funds, I think you need to demonstrate, here's our long-term strategy on how to address this. Either we're filling a gap, or this will enable us to get our fundraising activities back up, because fundraising and donations, dropped quite a bit during COVID. And so in some cases, it's about them, getting that fundraising machine back up and running. Yeah. Everybody has a different story, and I've really encouraged people, help us understand your situation. You're going to give us an application that shows the sources of your revenues and the uses, but we need to hear the story about how you've been impacted and how the people you serve have been impacted by COVID. And some of that's been a delayed reaction. So we want to hear the story, and if it involves operating, I think we are willing to look at those types of things.
Okay, all right. Just sort of on that same topic, the application allows for the applicant to submit a narrative not to exceed 700 words, and that's for that entire section, but that doesn't preclude them from submitting additional materials in attachments.
Right, not at all. In fact, I know we've had some applications already where they've, for example, as an attachment, submitted their annual report, which does a very effective job at telling an organization's story. But there may also be smaller organizations that don't have the capacity to even issue an annual report. But they might have a newspaper story about something, or an online clip of something that they've done. We want to hear. So yes, 700 words is limited for the application, the formal application itself. But my two favorite words on an application are "see attached." If you want to attach additional information, whether it's an annual report or a story that was in an online article or a newspaper article, those can help add depth to somebody's application, and we certainly want to be willing to do that.
Okay. Another thing that has come up is if an organization is not necessarily based in Oshkosh, but they serve residents in Oshkosh, are they still eligible to apply?
Yeah, the primary criteria is that they do serve people within the city of Oshkosh, because these funds were allocated to the city of Oshkosh. Other municipalities got funding as well, but they don't have to necessarily be home based in Oshkosh, but they have to be serving the area. We've supported groups that were based in Appleton and Fond du Lac, but they served Oshkosh residents, and that's really the key. I know the wording in some of the areas where we said Oshkosh based. It's like Oshkosh based means your base can serve Oshkosh residents. So I want to encourage people, and it doesn't have to be 100% Oshkosh residents, but it has to be a preponderance of the people you serve are Oshkosh residents, and some of the groups have demonstrated. We serve 62% of our clients are Oshkosh based. That stat comes from an actual application that we awarded in the first round. And that demonstrates that they are serving the Oshkosh community and meeting the goals. So those are the things we want to hear about. But yeah, we want you to serve Oshkosh residents primarily.
Okay. Well, we've had some reaction from Facebook viewers out there. And Mark, if you might be able to answer this one that came in by Facebook, are prior unfunded applicants able to reapply, and can their project be substantially similar?
The short answer is yes. They can be substantially similar, or they can be substantially dissimilar. We want to make sure that it meets these different long-term goals and short-term goals that I didn't get into in my presentation here, but I went into a good deal of depth with the presentations that we made at the public meetings. I would encourage people to look at that. But we will accept from people who have been awarded previous ARPA funding and maybe have a new different program, people who have been rejected or want to modify it. Some applications, they just didn't have the follow through with people. There was one agency that lost a staff member, so they weren't able to keep going with their application. If they want to bring it back, they absolutely can bring it back. We want to see it.
Okay. Another Facebook question here. How are applications evaluated and recommended to council, and how does that process work?
Well, the process works very similar to how we evaluate our grants for community development block grant dollars. And we've identified some short and long-term goals that are there. And I would encourage people to take a look at our website for some of the meetings. But maybe just I'll just put these up on the screen real quick, and if you want to toss up slide 4, these are some of the criteria that we use. So this is helping those with immediate needs, and that sometimes has been a delayed reaction with COVID, because it's not just people who suffered from COVID, it's because of everything that happened through the COVID pandemic. A lot of agencies were negatively impacted, or their clients were negatively impacted in ways they couldn't even imagine. So immediate needs are what's happening today that you need to take care of. Of course, directly impacted by COVID, but that probably isn't as much as it used to be. Politically acceptable to council and the community. It's got to have some community demand that the community believes and the council believes that it's acceptable. And leveraging ARPA funds with other revenue sources, and of course avoiding duplication of effort with other agencies, and avoid duplication if you've already asked for ARPA funds from somebody else for the exact same thing. Not as likely that you would be funded, because we want to make sure that more groups can have these resources available to them. And if you've gotten ARPA funds already for the same exact program, it's more likely than not that you wouldn't get funded by us. But that's just one of those areas where we have kind of drawn the line. And then slide 5 shows some of our long-term goals. We have our strategic plan that we refer to quite often. That link is available in the application, so look for that. But long-term visible impact and long-term benefit to individuals and the community. So to the degree we can help people avoid, say, we've done programs where we've helped AdvoCap, for example. They had access to funds for rental assistance, but we were able to help leverage our funds that they had more staff that could take applications. That's short-term benefit because it's somebody who's in danger of being evicted, but the long-term benefit is there's such negative things that happen if you are evicted. You get on the homelessness continuum. That's not good. It can affect your health. It can affect so many things. So long-term benefits to the individuals as well. So you can get a short-term relief as well as a long-term benefit with the same thing. That's where we need to hear the stories on what people are looking for. So those are kind of the criteria that we use. But again, remember that this is not just to get your organization funded for this year. It's really about the organization demonstrating that they have a long-term plan to help people, or they're getting through a very narrow path that they've got to get through for their organization, or the people they serve can get some benefit. So it's kind of a combination of those things.
Okay, all right. We'd like to remind folks also that the entire review criteria sheet and information about evaluation of the projects is available on the city's website at oshkoshwi.gov, along with the FAQ sheet and the actual application. Mark, we had another question submitted through Facebook, and that one was, what types of projects have already been funded? I think they'd like just a little sample of what's already been done.
Sure, it's not in the FAQs, but I'll do my best to give you the answers. Most of them were capital oriented. The largest by far was the assisting with the Boys and Girls Club. The council did allocate $1.6 million, which was a substantial amount, but it still only represented about 10% or less of their total cost. So it kind of gives you some perspective on that. And the Boys and Girls Club served like 3,000 kids annually, so it really gives you an idea of the amount of the volume of help. We also assisted the Oshkosh Kids Foundation with the Tiny Homes Project, the Oshkosh Food Co-op, which because of timing, the food co-op was ineligible for some federal funding that would have otherwise been available had they been in business a little bit longer. But if you recall, they started business like 5 months before COVID hit. So bad timing for them. So that was one of them. The Christine Ann Center is doing some expansion, a capital campaign. Again, roughly 5 to 10% of that one. And AdvoCap, I mentioned that one. They had access to funds to do rental assistance, which we did not want to get into the rental assistance aspect of it, because that could have been a long-term commitment on our part and a very expensive one. We were able to leverage our dollars for them to hire people that could take these applications for rental assistance or mortgage assistance. So we help both renters and home buyers, and so they were able to process a lot more applications because we were able to help them with that. And I'm trying to think if there's, and the COTS Transitional Housing, they purchased one of the buildings that was over at Father Carr's place to be homeless shelter, and that's a transitional housing for people that are the next step above being in an overnight type of shelter, like day-by-day shelter. So those are the examples of the ones we did. Primarily capital, but that's just because that was the real emphasis in the first round. That's not necessarily the emphasis. It's certainly a preference or a priority, but it's not the only thing. So I would not, I would encourage people not to be intimidated that it was only capital, it was only for big capital projects with big agencies. Yes, that's correct, but that is, please don't let that be discourage you from applying, because I think council recognizes that maybe we need to be a little more open-minded about it. And so I'll be looking at things that help meet those very goals. And if you can tell a good story, then what I will do is call you in and we'll sit down and go through it. And I may even make suggestions to amend your application after the deadline, because I want to help people be able to get the best possible application, the best possible consideration. It's not a guarantee of success, but you will make yourself, and our job is to help make you the most competitive so that you can get strong consideration when we ultimately take these recommendations to the city council.
Do we have a guideline on how much funding can be applied for?
We don't have a specific guideline. You know, on the capital side, I don't think we've gone above 10% on the capital side. But no one, I've been asked questions about, well, will you fund equipment and things like that? And people gave a bunch of examples. Well, small capital equipment, you know, it might be more, it could be, it'd probably be more than just 10% of that. But we don't have hard and fast rules. It's really about telling the story about why you need it, what you're doing to fundraise for other things. And that's why giving us the whole picture, you know, even if you may use it for, you know, item A or purpose A, demonstrating how you're doing so much more, this will just help fill the gap on a much larger project. giving us that understanding of the scope of your work will really help. And then it also demonstrates this is a bigger project than just purchasing this item. It's much bigger than that. And telling that story enables us to say, well, you know what, it might be worthwhile, even though we're funding half of, I'll say, a vehicle, and I just use that as an example. We want to know that you're buying a full vehicle, because you can't buy a half vehicle. But where's your funding source? Is it other fundraising? Is it funds you've been raising or you've had in reserve, and you want to get over the gap because your vehicle isn't running anymore, or your clients need transportation that previously you didn't have to worry about? Everybody's got a different story, and we want to hear what that story is and why you are where you are today, and how we can help you move to the next level or sustain yourself through this and going into the future.
Okay. And then also, we just wanted to remind folks that the funds it's preferred that the funds are spent by the end of this year, by December 31st, 2024. And that's an important point for us.
Yeah, that's our preference because of we can't reallocate funds after that date. So if we can get as much of that spent as possible, that would be great. But I would hate to be in a situation where somebody comes in and says, well, I can't spend it all, or I didn't get all my funds raised, so I can't use as much. And then I literally am writing a check back to the federal government. I can't reallocate it to another worthwhile project. So part of my goal will be to maintain contact with grant recipients throughout the process so that we know they're making good progress. And if we have to reallocate, we do it before the end of 2024 so we can switch that out. But that's why it's easier if we can have it spent by the end of the year, but it's not mandatory.
Okay. And then your thoughts on funding or partially funding a position?
Yeah, positions are tougher because of the nature of that. Because if it's a position that's going to remain, how do you sustain that? So, I would be looking for, what's your plan to sustain this position? Are you doing it so you can get your fundraising machine up and running to help fund this permanently? Is it just, if you're just doing it to reward somebody for volunteer work and it's a stipend or something, that we're probably less inclined to do that. If it's to get you through a period of time where you've got significant amount of demand that you need extra assistance, that's probably looked upon a little more favorably. But again, explaining why you need this position, and if you plan to maintain this position in the future, what's your plan to sustain it? Because we don't want to put you in a situation where we've lifted you up and then you come crashing down. We're more inclined to say, what are you going to do to sustain this position into the future, or no longer need it, and then it doesn't become a burden on you or your organization because we won't be able to fund it after the ARPA money's gone. Okay. All right.
We wanted to remind folks that you can submit questions via email, and you can send those to ARPA, ARPA comments at oshkoshwi.gov. And Mark, we did have an email that was submitted from Jessica, and she asks, is there a project size dollar amount that you would consider too small for ARPA?
I would say no, and I wouldn't be intimidated. The smallest grant we gave out in the first round was about $130,000. So I'm sure the question is, knowing that they were such bigger projects, are we less inclined to do smaller ones? No, we're not. We're more than happy to take a look at those. It's really about telling a story about how this need has developed and how we can help fill it, and how long-term you're going to take care of it. So there was never any minimum set to it. But at the beginning, most of these were capital items. I'm seeing that change, and I think council's aware of that. But from a volume standpoint, this non-infrastructure purposes is $2.35 million remaining. If I received a bunch of $10,000 applications, I'd have to go through 235 applications. So administratively, that would be very burdensome on us. So we're looking for a combination because some of these, we've got some deep needs in the community, but we also have some small needs that can get filled with, a quick fix. And so I would encourage you to not be intimidated by size, either too small or too big. Put it in, we'll have a conversation.
Okay, all right. And I know you alluded to this before, but just to remind again that if somebody previously applied for ARPA funds, maybe through the county, they're still welcome to apply for these funds.
Yeah, I know the county has already given some answers on their funds, and maybe they were unsuccessful in getting county ARPA funds. I would encourage you to apply. Oshkosh-based or Oshkosh serving, of course. Winnebago County was doing it on a county-wide basis. So, but if you were an agency that's serving people in Oshkosh and you didn't get any funding, I would encourage you to do it in this case. If you applied last go-round and didn't get any funding, take a look at your application. Take in everything I've just been saying, and how can you tweak your application maybe to make it more competitive. Or in some cases, you may have a totally different program or idea because things have evolved so much since COVID that the needs of the people you serve with your agency, the needs might be totally different. So I want to hear that story as well. Part of this process, I'm hoping, is that we create some re-engaged relationships with different groups, because one of the things I think we do very well is at the city is we help connect people with other like-minded people, either through funding or just partnerships. And while we want to see what partnerships you've developed, I also want to hear and maybe do some connecting based on things I hear. So I want to hear the stories so I can figure out ways, how can I connect this agency with that agency, collaborating together, providing each other services. There's so many things we can do together that will help make our community stronger. And our nonprofit entities are incredible partners, and we want to help them. So knowing their story is as important as giving them money. And I know that sounds a little corny, and I will use that line on people that we don't fund, but we need to help our agencies that are doing some wonderful work that we frankly don't always have the resources to do after ARPA's gone.
And also kind of following up on that as well, our community development department also may have some opportunities for some of these needs, even if they're not funded through the ARPA funding.
Thank you for reminding me of that, Andy, because typically when I bring agencies in, I also include someone from our community development department. And our community development director, Kelly Nyforth, has identified some of the needs that these agencies described, and we might be able to introduce you to our programs through our community development block grant program that can help agencies as well. And we've taken some applicants and connected them in community development, and they've actually had those same exact needs met, just they were a better candidate for community development block grant dollars than this program. So we're hoping to maybe be a little bit of a matchmaker, both in resources as well as relationships.
Okay, and the funds are not necessarily for business purposes.
No, they're not. I mean, but ARPA regulations do permit it being done for businesses. But since that all happened, the feds came out with other programs for businesses, and that's why I think a lot of businesses got assistance through other programs that were COVID related. I think it was called PPP. I can't remember, payroll protection program or something like that. But that helped some businesses. So I think that's why we really didn't see many businesses apply. But I've been made aware that there are perhaps some businesses being run by people who are recent arrivals to the country and have started a business, or language barriers or other barriers prevented them from applying for federal monies. So they're eligible because the program allows that. And the council didn't just say exclusively nonprofits. Most of this money will go to nonprofits. but we're open to listen to those ideas. But at the same time, we might connect you with another program that we think might be a better connection for you. And we're in regular contact with Greater Oshkosh Economic Development Corporation about connecting businesses that have been impacted by COVID. And maybe there might be another program we can direct them to. So these are the types of creative things we're trying to do, and not just say, oh, no, you can't get money from ARPA, have a nice day. Quite the opposite. We want to know more about you so that as we talk to other people, we might be able to connect you in a way maybe you didn't imagine, nor did we imagine.
Okay. Well, another point too that I've heard is that when folks apply for these funds, that these funds should be part of an overall plan. And is it important that the funds are an element within a plan, or can it just fund the whole thing, whatever it might be?
I think you want to demonstrate that it is part of a bigger plan that meets the needs of your organization and the people that you serve. And so I think the broader story you can tell, the better it is. And then it also demonstrates you're not just asking for one little item. That one little item may make the difference between success and failure for a larger program, or might enable you to serve even more people. And being able to serve more people as a result of this, then I view that as an investment. And we may not get it paid back in a check that comes back to us like a loan or a dividend on a stock investment, but the community dividends are what we're really looking for. And if we can prevent somebody from being homeless, or prevent somebody from having a mental health breakdown, which might cause them to lose their job or fall into drug or alcohol addiction. All those things, we want to hear what things you can do to help avoid some of the negative things that can happen in people's lives. And that's what our agencies that we have out in our community do such a good job at. They're so much more flexible than, say, a bureaucracy of the size of the city of Oshkosh. So you really become our partners to provide a service that we otherwise wouldn't be able to provide.
And that ties back to the long-term goals of this being able to provide some sort of a long-term impact.
Right. I mean, we want these agencies to be able to provide the services that are frankly not going to go away. But if they can fill a gap or bridge people to self-sustainability, they've created long-term benefits that I think are going to last for generations. And if we can get something that changes somebody's life for the good for now and many years in the future, I think that's a great investment in our societal infrastructure.
Okay. Do you have any quick advice for folks as they fill out the application at all?
Yeah, absolutely go through the criteria and try to find examples of how you meet the criteria. And some people might say, well, that's reaching. It's like, no, it's demonstrating that these needs are not just very black and white. There is a whole palette of stories to tell. And I think we need to hear how you fit in with our social infrastructure in our community, and how our investment in your organization can help improve our community. So that's pretty much it. Storytelling. It seems to be what's come out of these, and I want to hear the stories of what agencies are doing and what we can do to help them.
Okay. Well, I don't have any other questions that have been submitted. I don't know if you have any other thoughts or anything that maybe we didn't get to today.
No, just a reminder that the deadline is March 1st, and we'll begin looking at applications. We're already looking at applications, but the idea is to have perhaps council make some decisions on these by April. That doesn't mean that the checks are going to be written or anything like that, but we'll have them approved, and then we can go through the process of getting our contracts done, the agreements to allocate these funds. So I think you'll probably see action in 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay. And again, that final deadline is?
Is March 1st, which is a Friday, at 4:30 p.m.
Okay. All right. Mark, any other final thoughts for us?
No, I think that's about it, Andy. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, we thank you for your interest in this program today, and we encourage you to go to the Oshkosh Media YouTube page, where you'll find some recent public information meetings that were held at City Hall, and watch for replays of those on Oshkosh Media Gov TV. Remember also to visit the city's website, the Hot Topics section, where you'll find more details about ARPA grant funds. Thanks for joining us today.